I'll be honest, I'm in a quandary. Election day is coming up, but my quandary is not who to vote for between Harris and Trump. I will tell you today that I will never vote for the fascist, racist, rapist, pig, Trump. I wish the obvious slam dunk answer was Harris, and it may still be, but that's my quandary. I'm not sure. And I'll tell you why and see if you can relate or not. Many of you don't remember Vietnam, where we, the largest military power in the world, entered a small rural country with no real army or defense, called it a war, and tore the country apart, scorched it with napalm death and destruction, committed atrocities that still haven't been reported, killed as many hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children as we could, including our own soldiers, dragged it on for years, hoping to squeeze this little country to death and have our way with it, and still managed to lose the war. American veterans are still damaged from that war. Our methods have gotten more subtle. We don't show you the atrocities and horrors and war crimes that we committed, and we don't send American troops to fight if we can help it. We let others fight our wars with our weapons so American troops don't die. That's what's happening in Israel, where the state of Israel has become our puppet, our surrogate, and collaborator in the genocide of the Palestinian people. Some people don't like the word genocide. They try to argue that what's happening in Palestine is not a genocide. State-sponsored mass murder, destroying hospitals, homes, starving children, hurting and maiming and killing the innocent. They like to argue the semantics of the word. How many dead qualify as a slaughter, an atrocity, a genocide? We know the answer. Some would prefer not to admit it. Current events answers it daily. History will definitively answer that question. There is so much evidence, an overabundance of evidence from the world courts, the UN, that we simply choose to ignore. That the point of this war is not to protect the state of Israel, who have been reduced to sadistic prison guards with a license to slaughter, but to wipe out an entire people called Palestinians. Erase them from the present, the past, and the future. Yet we know from our own sordid history it's never going to work. No matter how many are starved, wounded, and killed, no matter how many women and children, Israel will not prevail. Just like we didn't prevail in Vietnam. But we continue to arm Israel to the tune of $2 billion just since October 7th against a poor, impoverished population already living in an apartheid or prison state. The Palestinian people will never give up, like all colonized people in so many countries will never give up until they achieve liberation. Nor should they. And someday in the future, when they restore themselves, like Vietnam, ironically, they will thrive again. Rebuilding is good business, and America knows that better than anyone. That's when America will become Palestine's partner. But back to my quandary. Who to vote for? Living in California, there doesn't seem to be much of an issue that Kamala will win this state. And again, anything to make sure Trump, who openly supports this genocide so he can access the Palestinian coast and build resorts, is driven once and for all from the public consciousness. But at what point do liberals, progressives, leftists put their collective foot down at the Biden administration's propping up of Israel's mass death parade? At what point do we put our foot down about corporate profits from weapon sales? At what point do we put our foot down at our addiction to oil, which is another secret agenda, our agenda, in this slaughter? Kamala has said nothing about stopping any of it if she's elected. And obviously neither has Trump, by the way, just as he really hasn't said anything specific about any issues except tariffs. So who to vote for? or to vote at all? How do we dare call ourselves liberals or progressives or leftists when mass death against the innocent is being performed in our name? I'm sure there are many with a similar crisis of conscience. As long as it costs $1 billion, $1 billion to run an American presidential campaign, then any third-party candidate who would be taken seriously would have to be plucked either from the same class as a Musk or a Trump, or someone who has proven their trustworthiness to that class, like Biden or Obama or Clinton, and presumably Kamala Harris. The last third-party candidate with that economic clout was Ross Perot, and when he got too popular, too much of a threat, he was destroyed. Special interests dominate our election and our politicians' agenda, and they have very little to nothing to do with our concerns. Erasing Trump and his family from the public scene is a must, and Cornel West and Jill Stein can't and won't do that. Only Kamala Harris can. Erasing Robert Kennedy and all he represents, the out-of-control, unearned privilege, wealth, and entitlement from the public consciousness is essential. Only Kamala Harris can do that. So do we vote for Kamala Harris and take more radical action on the issues once she's in office? Force her hand on Israel and Palestine and the rest of the Middle East and fossil fuels and the Supreme Court and women's rights and healthcare and workers' rights and work harder for a solution in Ukraine and stop the wealthy from dominating our lives and question military spending and space spending and private equity unchecked? You see, this is how we are coerced into perpetuating a system we don't believe in and know doesn't work. Is the answer to spend the next 4 years after a Kamala victory raising money for a legitimate third party? Do we work to change the laws? Or as some advocate, do we overthrow the whole thing with the use of political violence? Burn it all to the ground and start over? They all seem like pipe dreams, don't they? Meanwhile, the problems never get fixed. They get worse. They expand. They increase. Things aren't better. They will never be better, and they were bad to begin with. Make America great again? Come on. Every person of color, every minority, every Jew and Muslim, every black person who descends from slaves, every Hispanic person who ran from one kind of political oppression to something much worse here, every Japanese American who had relatives in detention camps, every woman who knew someone who had a back alley abortion knows America was never great. Suffering is the first noble truth, so we suffer. Some accept it, some resist it, some ignore it, but we all suffer. So I guess I'm curious. What do you think? What will you do?